Before the hands, before the digits, before even the word hour existed, time was a merciless god, but humanity dared to tame it. This is the story of how ancient civilizations captured the sun, water, and sand in their hands and changed humanity forever. Picture this. You wake up in ancient Egypt, 3,000 years before Christ. There's no alarm clock buzzing, no smartphone glowing with notifications. The sun hasn't risen yet, and you have absolutely no idea what time it is. Your entire world operates on a simple rhythm. Light and dark, hot and cold, hungry and full. Time isn't something you measure, it's something you feel. But here's the fascinating thing. Somewhere in that ancient world, someone was about to change everything. They looked up at the sky and thought, what if we could capture time itself? How did the first clocks emerge? And why were they more than just instruments? They were weapons of power, faith, and revolution. Today, on Legacy of Empires, we're uncovering the secrets of ancient timekeeping. You see, the story of timekeeping isn't just about clever inventions, it's about power. Think about it. Whoever controls time controls society. When you can tell people when to wake up, when to work, when to pray, when to rest, you're not just organizing their day, you're organizing their entire lives. The ancient Egyptians figured this out first. Their priests didn't just serve the gods, they served time itself. Every morning they would watch the sun rise and mark the shadows on their sacred obelisks. These weren't just decorative monuments. They were the world's first public clocks. The shadow would move throughout the day, and everyone in the city knew exactly what time it was just by looking up. But imagine the pressure on those priests. What happens when clouds cover the sun? What about during the rainy season? Suddenly, the entire kingdom loses track of time. Workers don't know when to start their shifts. Merchants can't schedule their trades. The whole system breaks down. That's when human ingenuity really kicked in. If the sun wasn't reliable, they'd find another way. Water flows consistently. Sand falls at a steady rate. The stars move in predictable patterns. Ancient civilizations began to experiment with these natural phenomena, turning them into the world's first mechanical timekeepers. The Babylonians created intricate water clocks that could measure time even in the darkest nights. The Chinese developed astronomical instruments that tracked celestial movements with stunning precision. The Greeks invented mechanical devices that could ring bells at specific times, the world's first alarm clocks. Each breakthrough wasn't just a technical achievement, it was a moment when humanity took another step toward controlling the uncontrollable. These ancient engineers weren't just building clocks, they were building the foundation of organized society as we know it. The story we're about to tell you spans continents and centuries. It's filled with brilliant minds, political intrigue, and innovations that seem almost magical even by today's standards. From the shadow clocks of pharaohs to the water-powered marvels of Rome, we'll discover how these ancient timekeepers didn't just measure moments. They created the very concept of scheduled, organized human civilization. Ready to journey back in time? Let's begin where it all started, under the blazing sun of ancient Egypt, where shadows first learned to tell time. If you love history as much as we do, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires to keep exploring the legacy of the ancient world. In Egypt of 3,000 years before Christ, the sun wasn't just a god, it was a timekeeper. Obelisks cast shadows that divided the day into sacred hours, but there was a problem. At night, the clock disappeared, and with it, the control of time. Let me paint you a picture of ancient Memphis on a typical morning. The sun rises over the Nile, and immediately, the entire city springs into action. But not randomly, with precise, almost military coordination. How? Because towering above the city center stands a massive granite obelisk, and its shadow is about to become the most important thing in everyone's day. As the sun climbs higher, the shadow moves across carefully carved lines etched into the stone plaza below. Each line represents a different hour, and the priests have spent years perfecting these markings. When the shadow touches the third line, the morning shift of workers heads to the pyramid construction site. When it reaches the sixth line, merchants know it's time to open their stalls in the marketplace. But here's what's truly remarkable. These weren't just crude scratches in the stone. The ancient Egyptians discovered something that would make any modern engineer proud. They realized that the sun's path changes throughout the year. In summer, it arcs high overhead. In winter, it stays lower on the horizon. So they created something ingenious, sundials with different sets of markings for different seasons. The first Egyptian sundials had different markings for winter and summer, a clever adaptation to handle the sun's changing angle throughout the year. Picture the head priest walking around the obelisk twice a year, carefully adjusting the hour markers. During the summer solstice, he'd use one set of lines. During the winter solstice, he'd switch to completely different markings. It was like having a seasonal adjustment built right into their timekeeping system, thousands of years before anyone even dreamed of daylight saving time. These shadow clocks weren't just practical tools, they were symbols of divine authority. The pharaoh didn't just rule over people, he ruled over time itself. When you could tell your subjects not just what to do, but exactly when to do it, you wielded a power that seemed almost supernatural. But then came the problem that would haunt timekeepers for centuries. Every single evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, something terrible happened. The shadow disappeared. The lines became meaningless. The entire system of organized time simply vanished into darkness. Imagine being a priest responsible for waking the workers at dawn, but having no way to know when dawn was coming. This wasn't just inconvenient, it was a crisis of authority. How could the pharaoh claim to control time if time itself disappeared every night? The workers would wake up whenever they felt like it. The guards wouldn't know when to change shifts. The entire carefully orchestrated society would slip into chaos. Night after night, the priests would stand beside their useless obelisks, watching the stars wheel overhead, desperately trying to figure out some other way to measure the passing hours. They knew the sun would rise again, but when? How many hours of darkness were left? The Egyptians tried everything. They experimented with star charts, tracking the movement of specific constellations. They studied the phases of the moon. Some priests even tried to estimate time by burning incense sticks of specific lengths, watching how long it took the smoke to dissipate. But nothing worked as reliably as their beloved sundials. Every sunset brought the same frustrating reminder. They had conquered time during the day, but the night remained unconquered territory. This daily cycle of mastery and helplessness drove Egyptian engineers to push the boundaries of what was possible. If shadows couldn't work in darkness, they needed to find something else that could flow consistently whether the sun was shining or not. Something that didn't depend on weather, seasons, or the whims of the gods. They needed to invent a completely new kind of clock, one that could work even when their beloved sun abandoned them to the darkness. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, the priests of Babylon created the clepsydra, a water clock that could mark time even in the dark. But in Rome, these machines became political weapons. While the Egyptian priests were still struggling with their disappearing shadows, something incredible was happening in the temples of ancient Babylon. A priest named Nabu-Rimani was staring at a simple clay pot with a small hole in the bottom, watching water drip steadily into a bowl below. But this wasn't just any ordinary pot. It was about to solve the greatest timekeeping challenge of the ancient world. You see, water doesn't care if it's day or night. It doesn't care about clouds or seasons. It just flows, steadily and predictably, obeying laws that even the gods couldn't change. Nabu-Rimani realized that if he could control the flow of water, he could control the measurement of time itself. The first water clock was beautifully simple. Picture a large bronze vessel filled with water, with a tiny, precisely drilled hole near the bottom. As water dripped out, the level inside the vessel would drop, revealing hour markings carved into the inner walls. No matter how dark the night, no matter how cloudy the sky, the water kept flowing and time kept ticking. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Babylonians didn't just create one water clock. They created an entire network of them throughout their temples. Priests would synchronize these clocks at sunrise, then rely on them to maintain accurate time throughout the night. For the first time in human history, people could track the hours even when the sun had abandoned them. Word of this miraculous invention spread like wildfire across the ancient world. Greek engineers began experimenting with more sophisticated designs, adding gears and bells that would ring at specific hours. The Chinese developed astronomical water clocks that could track not just hours, but the movements of planets and stars. Then the Romans got their hands on this technology, and everything changed. The first speaking time in history. Roman judges used water clocks to limit speeches in the Senate, creating the world's first time limits for public speaking. Picture this scene. It's a sweltering afternoon in the Roman Forum, and Senator Marcus Crassus is delivering what he believes will be the speech of his lifetime. He's passionate, he's eloquent, and he's completely convinced that his words will change the course of Roman history. The other senators are listening, some nodding, others looking skeptical. But there's something else in the room that demands attention. A bronze water clock sitting prominently on the judge's table. The water level is dropping steadily, and everyone can see it. Crassus glances at it nervously, but continues his speech, his voice growing more urgent. Imagine a politician in the middle of an impassioned speech, and the water runs out. Silence. His voice, cut short by the relentless flow of time. The water reaches the final marking. A small bell rings. The judge raises his hand. Time, he declares simply. Crassus stops mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open. His brilliant argument, his carefully crafted rhetoric, his political ambitions, all cut short by the steady drip of water. This wasn't just about fairness in debate. This was about power. By controlling the water clocks, Roman officials could literally control who got to speak and for how long. They could silence their enemies by giving them less time and favor their allies by providing larger water vessels. The political implications were staggering. Imagine if you could control not just what people said, but how long they had to say it. Suddenly, the art of rhetoric had to adapt to the tyranny of time. Speakers learned to make their points quickly and efficiently. They developed new techniques for grabbing attention immediately, knowing that every drop of water was precious. But the Romans didn't stop there. They installed public water clocks throughout their cities, creating the world's first urban time network. Citizens could walk up to these clocks at any hour of the day or night and know exactly what time it was. Markets opened and closed according to water clock schedules. Guards changed shifts based on water levels. Even gladiator games were timed using these remarkable devices. The technology became so advanced that Roman engineers created water clocks with multiple chambers, automatic refilling systems, and even seasonal adjustments that could account for the varying length of daylight hours throughout the year. But like all great inventions, water clocks came with their own set of problems. Water could freeze in winter, making the clocks useless. The tiny holes could get clogged with debris. The flow rate could change depending on the water pressure or temperature. And if someone accidentally bumped the clock or spilled the water, the entire timing system would be thrown off. Despite these challenges, water clocks represented a revolutionary leap forward in humanity's quest to master time. They proved that with enough ingenuity, people could create artificial systems that were more reliable than the natural world itself. These flowing timekeepers would dominate the ancient world for centuries, but they weren't the only solution that clever minds would devise. While the Romans were perfecting their water clocks, other civilizations were experimenting with an even more portable timekeeper, one that could be carried on ships, used in battles, and transported across vast distances without spilling a single drop. Are you fascinated by this ancient story? Then leave a comment, click like, share it with other history lovers, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires so you won't miss our next journey through the past. The Phoenicians and Carthaginians trusted in sand. The hourglass was so precise that it dictated the rowing shifts in naval warfare. Without it, Hannibal would never have crossed the Alps. Picture yourself on a Phoenician trading ship somewhere in the Mediterranean, 2,500 years ago. The sun is blazing overhead, but you're not looking at shadows on the deck. You're not watching water drip from a bronze vessel. Instead, you're staring at something that would seem almost magical to landlubbers. A glass bulb filled with fine sand, mounted in a wooden frame that can be flipped whenever the sand runs out. This is the hourglass, and it's about to revolutionize how civilizations think about portable timekeeping. The genius of the hourglass wasn't just in its simplicity, it was in its reliability. Water could freeze, evaporate, or splash out during rough seas. Sundials became useless when storms blocked the sun. But sand was consistent. It flowed at exactly the same rate whether you were sailing through calm waters or fighting for your life in a Mediterranean storm. The Phoenicians, those master traders and navigators, were the first to truly understand the power of this device. They realized that if you could measure time accurately while traveling, you could do something revolutionary. You could navigate by dead reckoning even when you couldn't see the stars. Here's how it worked. A navigator would flip his hourglass and simultaneously throw a rope with knots tied at regular intervals over the side of the ship. As the ship moved forward, he'd count how many knots passed through his hands before the sand ran out. Knots per hour. That's literally where we get the term knots for measuring ship speed. But the real breakthrough came when these master seafarers started using hourglasses for something much more crucial, coordinating their crews during long voyages and military campaigns. Imagine you're a Carthaginian admiral preparing for a naval battle against the Romans. You have dozens of war galleys, each powered by hundreds of rowers. These men need to work in perfect synchronization, not just within each ship, but across your entire fleet. How do you coordinate the rowing shifts of thousands of men spread across miles of ocean? The answer was hourglasses. Each ship carried multiple sand timers, and the rowing captains would flip them simultaneously at the start of each shift. When the sand ran out, it was time to rotate the rowers. Fresh men would take the oars while the exhausted rowers rested. This system was so precise that entire fleets could maintain coordinated movement for hours at a time. This brings us to one of the most famous military campaigns in history. When Hannibal decided to march his army from Spain to Italy, he wasn't just planning a land route, he was planning a logistical nightmare that would require precise timing across hundreds of miles of treacherous terrain. The secret weapon? Hourglasses. Hannibal's officers used them to coordinate the movement of different sections of his massive army. Supply trains needed to reach specific mountain passes at exactly the right time. Scout units had to report back on precise schedules. Even the famous war elephants were moved according to hourglass timing to ensure they wouldn't block the narrow alpine paths for too long. Without this precise timekeeping, Hannibal's army would have been scattered across the mountains, vulnerable to Roman attacks and mountain weather. The hourglasses didn't just help him cross the Alps, they made the crossing possible. But here's a fascinating detail that shows just how versatile these devices were. The Greeks found a completely different use for hourglasses that had nothing to do with navigation or warfare. Hourglasses were used during childbirth in ancient Greece. Doctors would time contractions with them. Picture an ancient Greek physician named Hippocrates attending a difficult birth in Athens. The expectant mother is in labor, and timing is everything. Too much time between contractions could signal complications. Too little time might mean the baby is coming too quickly for a safe delivery. So the doctor places a small hourglass beside the birthing bed. Each time a contraction begins, he flips the timer. When the sand runs out, he knows exactly how long the contraction lasted and how much time has passed since the last one. This information helps him determine whether the labor is progressing normally or if he needs to intervene. This wasn't just medical superstition. It was genuine scientific observation. Greek physicians discovered that the timing of contractions could predict complications hours before they became life-threatening. The humble hourglass became a tool for saving lives, turning the abstract concept of time into a practical medical instrument. The beauty of the hourglass was its democratic nature. Unlike the massive sundials that required skilled priests to interpret, or the complex water clocks that needed constant maintenance, anyone could use an hourglass. Farmers used them to time their bread baking. Merchants used them to measure fair work periods for their employees. Even children could flip the sand timer and understand when their playtime was over. But perhaps most importantly, hourglasses gave humanity its first truly portable relationship with time. For the first time in history, people could carry time with them wherever they went. They could take it on ships, into battle, up mountains, or into remote villages. Time was no longer tied to temples, palaces, or city centers. It became personal. This portability would prove crucial as civilizations began to expand beyond their original borders. Roman legions carried hourglasses on their campaigns. Viking explorers used them to navigate uncharted seas. Medieval pilgrims relied on them to maintain prayer schedules during long journeys to distant shrines. The hourglass represented more than just another timekeeping device. It represented humanity's growing mastery over time itself. No longer bound by the sun's schedule or dependent on flowing water, people could create their own temporal rhythm wherever they went. Yet even as these remarkable devices spread across the ancient world, they still couldn't solve the fundamental challenge that had plagued timekeepers since the beginning. How do you measure time with perfect accuracy, day after day, year after year, regardless of weather, location, or human error? That quest would continue to drive innovation for centuries to come. But the foundations had been laid. The sun, water, and sand had all been tamed and put to work in service of human civilization. Time was no longer an untouchable force of nature. It had become a tool, a weapon, and a companion in humanity's endless journey forward. Today we check the time with a glance at our phone. But every click is an echo of those first dreamers who looked up at the sky and said, "This moment is mine." Have we, in mastering time, lost something of its magic? Think about what you did this morning. You probably woke up to an alarm, checked your phone for the time, maybe glanced at your smartwatch while brushing your teeth. Time surrounded you from the moment you opened your eyes. Precise, digital, constant. But did you ever stop to think about the incredible journey that brought us to this moment? Every time you tap your phone screen to check the time, you're participating in a ritual that connects you directly to that ancient Egyptian priest standing beside his obelisk, watching shadows creep across stone. You're linked to the Babylonian temple keeper carefully monitoring his water clock through the night. You're part of the same human story as the Phoenician navigator flipping his hourglass in the middle of a storm-tossed sea. These ancient timekeepers weren't just building clever devices. They were fundamentally changing what it meant to be human. Before sundials, water clocks, and hourglasses, people lived in harmony with natural rhythms. They woke with the sun, ate when they were hungry, slept when darkness fell. Time was something that happened to them, not something they controlled. But those first timekeepers changed everything. They took the flowing, organic experience of time and chopped it into measurable pieces. They created hours, minutes, and the precise schedules that would eventually give birth to our modern world. Every factory shift, every school bell, every business meeting, all of it traces back to those ancient innovations. Here's what's truly remarkable. The basic principles haven't changed. Your smartphone's clock still relies on regular, predictable cycles, not the sun's shadow or dripping water, but the vibrations of a quartz crystal. The technology is different, but the fundamental idea is exactly the same. We're still finding natural phenomena that repeat consistently and using them to measure the passage of time. But something profound has been lost along the way. Those ancient timekeepers lived with a deep awareness of time's mystery. When an Egyptian priest watched the sun rise and cast its first shadow, he was witnessing something sacred. When a Roman senator heard the bell of a water clock, he felt the weight of mortality. When a Greek physician timed contractions with an hourglass, he was participating in the miracle of new life. Today, time has become invisible. We carry incredibly precise clocks in our pockets, but we rarely think about the miracle of measurement itself. We schedule our lives down to the minute, but we've lost the sense of wonder that comes from watching shadows move or sand fall. Consider this. An ancient Carthaginian sailor, using an hourglass to navigate the Mediterranean, probably had a deeper relationship with time than most of us do today. He could feel the rhythm of the sand, see the physical passage of moments, understand viscerally that time was something precious and finite. He couldn't check his phone when he was bored. He had to live fully in whatever moment the hourglass showed him. Maybe that's why these ancient stories still fascinate us. In a world where time has become abstract and digital, there's something compelling about devices you could touch, hear, and see. Something human about the imperfection of shadows that disappeared at night, water that could freeze, and sand that could get stuck in humid weather. These imperfections weren't bugs. They were features. They reminded people constantly that time was bigger than human control. No matter how clever their devices, no matter how precise their measurements, time itself remained fundamentally mysterious and powerful. The ancient timekeepers understood something we've forgotten, that measuring time and understanding time are two completely different things. They could create increasingly accurate clocks, but they never lost sight of the fact that time was ultimately beyond human comprehension. They measured it, but they also respected it. Today, we've become so good at measuring time that we sometimes forget to experience it. We schedule our lives so precisely that we lose the ability to be spontaneous. We track our hours so carefully that we forget to live in the moment. We've gained incredible control over time, but have we lost something essential about what it means to be human? What do you think this story tells us about our own world? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like the video, share it, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more legends, truths, and secrets from the ancient world. Perhaps the greatest lesson from these ancient timekeepers isn't about technology at all. It's about balance. They showed us that humans can be incredibly innovative when faced with challenges, that we can tame natural forces and bend them to our will. But they also reminded us that some mysteries are worth preserving, that efficiency isn't everything, and that the most important moments in life can't be measured by any clock. The next time you check your phone for the time, take a moment to think about those ancient dreamers. Remember the priest watching shadows, the judge timing speeches, the navigator flipping sand. They gave us the gift of measured time, but they also understood something we're still learning, that the most meaningful moments are the ones that make us forget about time altogether. Time remains as mysterious today as it was 5,000 years ago. We've just gotten better at pretending we understand it. Maybe that's the real magic. Not that we've conquered time, but that time continues to humble us, surprise us, and remind us that being human means living in the space between moments where neither sundials nor smartphones can follow us.